If you have a Sony camera and you want to set it up for real estate photography and videography, stick around. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. This technically could, make sense for both Canon cameras, Nikon cameras, Fuji cameras, everything. The basics, principles are the same. But I'm going to record my settings on my ZV-E1 just to give you an idea of exactly how I have it set up for photos first, and then for videography. So first here, we're just in, the main screen. If I focus here, we can see the wall, but I have an 85mm on, so it's going to be super zoomed in. On the back here, we have, trash button, play button. So this gets us into the playback menu, which is super cool. And then we have the menu right here. This I have controlling the ISO. This I have controlling the shutter speed. And the ZV-E1 doesn't have too much more as far as buttons and dials to, make sure, you can customize everything. But as it stands right now, let's hop into the menu and see exactly what these settings are. So if I just press the menu button here, and we'll just start at the very, very top, image quality record. So this is just for photos, mind you. So we're going to go in here and we're going to make sure that we're in JPEG, okay? The HEIF setting is for high efficiency image video or image frequency or something like that. It's what your smartphone uses, and you can use it for this. I don't know why you would. Maybe someone smarter than me can put it in the comments. But as far as the image quality goes, we're going to leave it in JPEG, but then the file format we're going to have as RAW. You don't want to have RAW plus JPEG because then you're going to be taking 2 photos for every single one. You don't want to have it in just JPEG. When you can have it in RAW, you might as well have it in RAW. RAW file type, we're going to do uncompressed. We have lossless, compressed, and compressed. We want uncompressed RAWs. JPEG quality doesn't matter too much. We're just having extra fine. And the JPEG image size, you want large, the full 12 megapixels. This is so if you're accidentally shooting in JPEG mode, you aren't screwing yourself up. You can use it as kind of a backup. So for aspect ratios, it's really important that we stick at 3:2. You might be tempted to do 16:9, but that wouldn't make sense. It's really wide. I mean, you're viewing this on YouTube, which is a 16:9 aspect ratio. But for photos, when you're shooting in 3:2, you get a lot higher resolution or higher aspect ratio. It's the same with the 4:3. What you want to do is make it so that as you deliver it, all the photos you deliver, all the aerial photos you deliver, they all match in aspect ratio. So we're going to have them be 3:2. DJI drones cannot shoot in 3:2. They shoot in either 4:3 or 16:9. I shoot all my aerial stuff in 4:3, and then I crop it to 3:2. So we want to keep it 3:2. That's what the sensor is anyways, so you're capturing the entire thing. For file format for video, we won't cover it quite yet because we're still in the photo tab, as you can see right here. So as soon as we're ready to go over video stuff, we'll go over it then. So we're going to skip all the kind of movie stuff. I mean, we can kind of scroll through and see, but none of this is really important for the photo tab. It's also worth it to mention that when you're in the photo or video or S&Q mode, it's going to save all those settings. Typically, when you set up for photos in the photo tab, it's going to save it for photos. When you set up for video in the video tab, it'll save it for video. In the second, in media, we have format. This is super important. You can even add it to the starred up here to make sure it's quick select. But at the beginning of each day, I make sure I have it all off of the camera, and then when I arrive to my first shoot, I'm going to format the SD card, which looks like this. We hit enter, and it formats the SD card. And then we're ready to go. You don't want to do that at your second shoot because then you'll delete everything from your first shoot, and it's a pain. So scrolling on down, we don't have to worry about any of this in the file. Shooting mode is important. We want manual exposure. For the ZV-E1, it doesn't have the little top dial where you can control the shoot mode, so you have to go into the settings, so we want it manual exposure. So we'll hop back into the menu here. Camera set memory, don't worry too much about it right now. In drive mode, this is the important part. When you first get it, it's probably going to be in single shooting mode, so you want to scroll all the way down to where it says BRKC. BRKC stands for continual auto bracketing or continuous auto bracketing or whatever. If you're like me, I shoot 2.0 EV3, which means it takes really, really dark to medium to really, really bright in 3 shots, or you can have it at 2 EV5, which takes 5 total shots, really dark to really, really bright. I typically do 2.0 EV3 for interiors and 2.0 EV5 for exteriors if I'm not feeling lazy. For bracket settings, we're going to leave it on a 2-second timer. If you don't have it on a 2-second timer, when you tap the shutter button, it will probably not do the entire continue, like it won't take all 3 shots or all 5 shots. So you want to leave it on a self timer, not only so it does it, but also to eliminate any shake in the tripod. So when you have it set up and you're about to take the photo and you press the shutter, you're introducing a lot of movement into the camera. So we want to get rid of that movement, and we get rid of that movement by having the 2-second timer on. So once we hit the shutter, it'll wait 2 seconds, allow the tripod to stabilize, and then so on and so forth. It takes it super nice. Bracket order, it'll come stock 0 to negative to plus. We want to change that to negative to 0 to plus, just so that when you load everything into your computer, you can see the entire brackets. It's going to go dark, medium to bright, or darkest to brightest if you have 5 shots. It's just a whole lot easier to visualize. I don't know why it comes with 0 to negative to plus. We're going to change it to negative to 0 to plus. We don't have to worry about focus bracket settings. You don't have to worry about interval shoot functions. The ZV-E1 has no mechanical shutter, so you can turn the silent mode on or off. I have it off because I don't like hearing the shutter. It's completely up to you. It doesn't have a mechanical shutter, so the shutter noise that you're hearing on a ZV-E1 is actually fake. Release without lens, I have that enabled. All that means is that if you put a manual focus lens on it, like let's say you want to adapt an old MD mount or M42 mount lens from the 80s or 90s or whatever, and you have to use an adapter, if you don't have release without lens on there, then it will not recognize that there's a lens on there, and the shutter will close and you won't be able to do anything. So I just leave that on. Don't need to worry about anything else on here. Steady shot you can leave on. It's up to you how you want to do it, but having steady shot on just makes your photos be a little bit less blurry, or there's less room for error, I should say, for blurry photos. Shooting display, I like to keep grid line display on and rule of thirds grid. That's what this looks like right here. You can see these lines at the top and the middle, so it goes vertical and horizontal. It's just nice to have a little bit of help when you're setting up your composition. We don't need product showcase. We don't need any of that. For exposure, really, so, I mean, this, don't worry about it. Don't worry about any of this. Metering you can change. So metering, I have it in multi, just so it takes the entire image from here to here, and it evaluates the entire brightness of the image and then gives you the exposure right there. But we don't have to worry about really any of this other stuff for photos. We'll just leave all that as is. Focus area you do want to set to wide. If you have it on something like a spot, like a large spot or whatever, it won't do a good enough job. Like if you're in a corner, let's say, or rather if you're facing a corner and there's no furniture, it's just an empty room, it might struggle capturing focus. So just leave it on wide so it has a larger surface area to cover. Don't have to worry about any of this stuff for photos, none of this stuff at all. Just kind of scrolling through. Leave your Wi-Fi turned off, and even your Bluetooth turned off if you don't use it. If you're transferring files via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on this, it's actually going to convert the RAWs to JPEGs, I believe, so you're going to lose out on a lot of data that way. So just make sure, when you're ready to put all of the stuff into your computer, you just take out your SD card and plug it in. You can get something like this. This was, I think, $8, and it's a micro SD and regular SD card reader. You can kind of see that right there. So we got all that stuff on there. So you can do something like that. But I think that's it for photos. As far as the settings that I use specifically, obviously I have my 85mm on here, so the photos aren't going to be representative because I'm using my wide angle to shoot this video on. But essentially, we want to put our aperture on f8. Okay, we're going to leave it on f8. We're going to hit enter. Our ISO is going to go all the way down to 320. Okay, we'll leave that there. And then your shutter speed is going to be the only thing that changes to get proper exposure throughout the entire course of your shoot. So in this interior, I've got some lights on, but still, for it to be properly exposed at the metering point right here, 0.0 across the entire range, it's at 1/15th of a second, which is pretty slow. If we did the entire, like if we did a bracket right here, we could see how long it would take. Not too bad. Obviously, the slower the shutter, the longer the photo is going to take, and you might be tempted to, increase the ISO to accommodate for that. But if you have kind of a crappier camera, you'll start introducing noise in the final image. So I've just found it best to leave the ISO on 320. Shutter speed varies, and then aperture stays at f8. As far as photos go, I think that's really it. I'm not going to go over custom buttons really in this video. You can if you want to. Oh shoot, I'll just kind of go over a little bit about it. If you wanted to customize the buttons and dials, you could go to the briefcase in here and dial customize, and you can do for photo and video both specifically. So in photo mode, we can have, it shows you what all the numbers are that you're customizing. I don't have any in photo mode, but I have them in video. So my lens, I have it to auto white balance toggle hold, which I have, lock toggle, which I've gone over in previous videos. Then APS-C Super 35 mode on button 1, which is right here, and then ISO for the dial and all that stuff. So you can mess around with all that there. But for video mode, if we're going to go into that, we're going to switch it from right here. Now we're in video mode. The settings are a little bit different. So typically for video, if I'm shooting interiors, I'm going to shoot at the lowest, which is f2.8. This one goes all the way to f1.4, but it's a razor thin field of focus, or depth of field for focus. I can't remember the exact terminology, but we'll leave it on f2.8. You might be curious as to why we don't film at f8. That's just going to be way too dark. And for video clips, it's a little bit different, because whereas a photo, you want everything to be in focus because you're just staring at that photo. Video is quick scenes in succession. So it doesn't really matter if something specifically that we're not wanting to focus on isn't in focus, right? If our subject is the living room, if you're shooting far enough away, the whole thing will be in focus. But, let's say you want to get really close and get some nice depth of field for like a detail shot or something like that. We leave it at f2.8. And shutter speed. So we're going to shoot at, we'll go over all these settings actually here in a bit. So let's go back to the video settings, which is at the very top. Image quality, this is going to be XAVC S 4K. So you can do HS, and it's going to be slightly higher quality, probably won't be visible to most people. XAVC S 4K is a very, very comparable image quality, but the file sizes are a whole lot smaller. So we're going to do that. In movie settings, we're going to, in this case, we're going to hit it to 60 frames per second. I have it in video mode, and it's worth it to note that if you're in video mode, you know what, actually, so here's what we're going to do. Let's go over video mode settings for something like an agent intro, because when you have it on video mode, it's going to be different settings than S and Q. S and Q stands for slow and quick, and it does not record audio. So if I'm doing a listing video, then I'm filming in S and Q mode. But if I need to do an agent intro, or I need to capture dialogue, or I need to shoot something at 30 frames per second or whatever, then I need to switch it to video mode so I can record that audio. But if I'm doing a property video, it's in S&Q and it's done. Okay, so let's go over the video settings for the regular video mode. Let's say you're doing something like an agent intro. So I'm going to do 30 frames per second. I'm going to do the highest quality, so 140M, 422, 10-bit color depth. That's super important. S&Q settings we can change from here, so let's go into S&Q settings. And from here, we want the left side to say 30 frames per second and the right side to say 60 frames per second. And what this does is when you're recording, it's going to record at 60 frames per second, but it's going to automatically output at 30 frames per second. So everything that you film is going to be automatically slowed down by 2. Now you could just change the video mode settings to shoot 60 frames per second, but then you might forget what video mode you're in, what frames per second, get confused. It can turn nightmarish. I've messed up a few times doing that. So it's easier to separate video mode from S&Q. But S&Q is nice because when you have to put the video into something like Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro or whatever, you have to slow down that footage or interpret that footage as 30 frames per second. So it slows it down. This slows it down for you. 30 frames per second on the left, 60 frames per second on the right. Record setting, again, highest that you can do, 140M, 422, 10-bit, and then we'll go back. We don't have to worry about time-lapse. Log shooting, so this is going to be specific for the ZV-E1 and FX3 and A7S3, I believe. The log shooting setting is typically, you have to go into a picture profile, but for this they changed it. If you're shooting on something like this and you want to be able to color grade it, this is really, really important. You'll go into log shooting, you'll turn on flexible ISO. Don't ask me what that is. And then the color gamut, sgamut3.cine /slog3. And this will give you the flat color profile that you can color grade later, and it gets you a whole bunch more dynamic range, and it's just a better choice to shoot in. I mean, you can shoot in the standard picture profile, which bakes in the standard Rec 709 conversion LUT, but then you're losing out on dynamic range, and why do you have this camera? Embed LUT file, you want to make sure this is turned off. We do not want the LUT file embedded, or else that we're not shooting in log anymore. We're just shooting in a picture profile or really an embedded LUT. So make sure that the embed LUT file is turned off, but we do want to view the LUT. So we'll figure out how to do that next. Proxy shooting, if you want to do it, I like to do it just in case. My computer can handle all the quality that I throw at it, the really high video quality stuff. But if you have a slightly crappier computer, you might want to use proxy recording. So we can turn it on, and then it'll record everything you record. It'll record it in both high frame or high resolution and low resolution. You can edit the low resolution ones, and then right before you're ready to export, you can switch over everything, and then it'll export the high quality one. So XAVCS HD, it's going to be 6 megabytes, 420 8-bit. It can save you some time. Don't have to worry about anything else right here. Don't have to do any of this. Audio recording on because we want it on because we're in video mode, not S and Q. Audio record level I have sitting at around 18. Audio out timing, don't worry about that. Wind noise reduction, I leave it off because I usually have like a microphone set in, so don't worry too much about any of that. Don't have to worry about anything to do with time code. Here's the fun part, steady shot. So if you have it off and you shake it around like this like crazy, it's, I've got this 85 mil on, so you're not gonna be able to see much, but the stabilization on this camera is supremely good on most Sonys. But the difference between active and dynamic active crops in by 1.3 times. So this is what you see full frame. It'll crop into about like right here. So, keep that in mind if you have like a 16 millimeter lens and you have to multiply 16 times 1.3 and that's your new field of view, just be careful. I usually leave mine on active because it's sitting on a gimbal anyways. Zoom, we don't really need to worry about that. Shooting display, still same thing on rule of thirds grid, and then emphasized record display on. I think that's what gives you the red tally light around it, which is super useful to have. Not every camera has that. And that's really all it is for the record settings. So let's go through and check the ISO. So you can, by default, this will come with the lowest ISO being at 640 because that's the number 1 base ISO, but you can change it to allow a lower ISO. And I changed it to 160. So the ISO range limit is 100 to 409,600, which is crazy. I'll never use that. Exposure compensation, don't worry too much about this. Metering mode, again, we're in multi. And then spot metering point, I have it in the center. Auto white balance, I keep that on. If you want to have a different type of white balance, you can. I leave it on, and then I program the button on the side to lock the white balance. Shockless white balance, I leave it on 1, which is super fast. And then I have priority set and auto white balance as white. And then here's where you select your LUT. So remember when I was talking about shooting in log and you'll want to select your LUT, your preview LUT, but you don't want to embed it, this is where you select it. So it gives you a bunch to choose from. If you have it in S-Log 3, you can see it's pretty flat. I know it's kind of hard to tell because I'm just filming a wall, but the S709 will do a standard Rec 709 color space conversion transform, so you can see what your footage would look like if you converted it to S709, but it doesn't actually convert it for you. So it's still going to come out when you put it into your computer as very, very flat because it's going to be log, but in your monitor right here, it'll show you a preview of what it's supposed to look like. Soft skin effect, I turn off. Zebra display you can have on, super handy for doing exposure stuff. I usually leave my level around 80. Focus mode, continue autofocus. Autofocus transition speed, I have it about 4, which is right down the middle. And then I have the next one on 5 responsive. And this video would be super, super long if I explained what all of this stuff means. If you want to see kind of a more in-depth breakdown on any of these things, just leave it in the comments below. Focus area wide, again. Focus peaking is super important. So focus area color we leave on red. You can do white or red. Actually, is this the focus peaking mode? No, peaking display is down here. So we want to do peaking display on, middle, and then red. If you have it on high, then it's going to show you that things are in focus when they might not be in focus. So don't worry about that. Leave it at mid. And peaking color, you can have red, yellow, blue, or white. I leave mine on red. It's the easiest to see. And then don't really have to worry about any of this stuff. So when we're back in the main menu, when you're shooting in 60 frames per second, or actually, sorry, let's switch over to S and Q mode now, and it's going to give this little dialog box. You gotta choose manual every single time. Because we're shooting in 60 frames per second, you want the shutter speed to be 1/125. Lowest aperture that you can go, and then your ISO does the rest of the heavy lifting. So I take a look at this metering right here, and for my LUT specifically, I expose everything at plus 1.7. When you're shooting in log, you need to overexpose by 1.5 to 2 stops. If you expose it right at 0, and then you do the color space transform, you add the LUT, there's going to be a ton of noise. If you're doing a flat color profile, just expose higher. The LUT that I specifically use works really good at plus 1.7. Really, the main thing to understand here is that when you're doing video, the shutter speed stays the same, the aperture stays the same. This is for interiors. The aperture stays the same, so the only thing that changes is your ISO. Okay, and then your white balance is right here. When you go outside, though, like if I were to point this at a light, this would be just absolutely blown out. So what you might have to do is you have to change the aperture to something more like f8 or f9, and then, you know, obviously your ISO, we'd want it to change it all the way as low as it can possibly go. You might even need to crank your shutter speed a bit. You should get an ND filter, which is like sunglasses for your lens, so that it stops more light from coming in, so you can keep your shutter speed correct for, you know, nice motion blur and all that. But for these property videos, you didn't hear it from me, but it doesn't really matter unless you're doing like super high quality stuff. So that's about it. That's the entire setup for photos and video and S&Q mode for my ZV-E1, and this applies to pretty much all newer Sonys. There might be some settings here and there that are a little bit different, but that's it. Bob's your uncle. See you later.